Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get going now. Thanks very much for your patience as we attempt to sort out some tech problems, although with no luck. So we are low on microphones, but we're going to make this work and it's going to be wonderful. Okay, so now we move into the first of the National Conference's panel discussions, which is a very exciting initiative for us. We're quite happy about this. The Q&A on your blue cards there, if you scan the QR code, is now open. Now, it's been noted that the internet in this room is not crash hot always. There is now Wi-Fi password over in this corner here. So if you'd like to connect to the hotel Wi-Fi, you're able to do that. The rules apply. If you're having trouble, just quietly indicate to one of our volunteers and they'll give you a hand. No worries about it. Now, to our panellists for this first exciting panel, which we're calling The Crown Under Attack. Very, very exciting. Beverley McArthur, a member of the Legislative Council, is the leader of the opposition in the Legislative Council of Victoria and a member of the Australian Monarchist League's Central Committee. The Honourable Rachel Merton, member of the Legislative Council, sits as a Liberal in the Legislative Council of New South Wales and is a member of the League's National Council. Katherine is a solicitor and women's rights campaigner, and Bridie Nolan is a barrister at law with more than 20 years' experience. Would you please make our panel very welcome? So bear with us as we get tech going. But I wanted to start a bit off the back of what John was talking about when he mentioned civics education. Now, those of you may be familiar, we have a Governor-General at the moment, and she's very keen on civics education too. But I wanted to start here and maybe get Bev's opinion on this to begin. Bev, is it possible that civics education can maybe go one of two ways? You can teach the right kind of civics, and perhaps you can teach civics that have perhaps an ideological end.
Well,
Are we on? It's my instinct, you know.
Well, thanks very much for that wonderful question, Alexander. I'm most grateful. In Victoria, we will do it the wrong way until November the 26th next year, because that's when we'll hopefully take over the government and get everything right. But at the moment in Victoria, not only do we have civics education, if we have it, it's about truth-telling. That's the most important aspect, or it's about a climate emergency, or it's about gender diversity. Even 3-year-olds in childcare have to have gender diversity education in Victoria. So civics education would be good if it taught a proper history. I mean, we're battling to... in Victoria, the government don't even put the flag on their signature block. We've got every other form of decoration, but no flags. So I spoke the other day in Parliament about the fact that we've got a big celebration coming up. The biggest flag in eternity was flown on the Royal Exhibition buildings for the 1901 Federation Conference, and perhaps we could celebrate that. But no, the Museums Victoria is not interested in that, and if they could, they'd do away with Captain Cook's Cottage and every other form of history that we should be celebrating. So we'd love to restore civics education, and I'm sure we'll be doing it the proper way after November next year.
Any comments?
Thank you. And look, in the true meaning of the civics education, this has been an issue I've been in the Parliament about 2 years, and that is the absence of civics education in the curriculum. And I have an assurance from the Acting Minister for Education that it's coming and it will be mandated. But I'm rather concerned, and I'll probably be on watch even more now, Bev, after what you've described about what that civics education can actually look like. And this was really drawn off on my my reports to the Parliament about going into the schools and talking about democracy and voting and Parliament and what my job is, how you make representations, how it works. And you know, and the kids are, you know, we do the ballot and we do formality, and there's huge interest in this. And so it's sort of off the back of that they want to be engaged and understand the system. So I'm definitely on watch on that. And in terms of, Bev, if I could just touch on, in terms of the New South Wales flag and symbols too, it's been another issue of mine in terms of the availability of the New South Wales flag in the schools. The Department of Education says it's available. I quiz the Secretariat at estimates about where's the flag, how many have you given out? Oh, not our job, we don't do this. And I said, well, it says it is available. And then the display of those flags, it went one step further where I got the government support on this, and that was to recognise the New South Wales flag and its history, and it should be on display in, you know, government institutions, including schools. There was a lot of interest. They found it very hard to push back on this. Then one step further by saying putting some protection on the flag, like what the Honourable John Howard did with the Australian flag. We do not have that on the New South Wales flag. Greens and the crossbench laugh and go, well, this is good. You know, we could have a cannabis flag. You know, it's an open slather on this. So I just think you've got to be onto this and to call this stuff out. So I commend you on that one, Bev. And yeah, I'm on higher watch now.
So I just want to add something to that. My girls are at public school and they can tell me in great detail what a songline is, but they can't tell me what the Magna Carta is. And I've noticed that has been in the media cycle over in Britain the last sort of 28, 48 hours, because David Lammy, who was questioned on the Magna Carta some years ago, barely even knew what it was. And now he's attacking one of the few rights we have in our constitution, which is trial by jury. So over there, trial by jury is under attack. They're going to reserve it for only the most serious crimes because they have a backlog of about 80,000 criminal cases. And then usually what happens in the UK does flow down here. So that is one of our few rights that's actually explicit in our constitution. And I wouldn't be surprised if that actually flows down. And I would say that arises from the fact that people do not understand their history. People do not understand what the Magna Carta is. They are not being taught what that is in schools. They are not being taught that is the basis for 1,000 years of percolation of the rule of law, where we sit here today living in the society that we live in, that John Anderson so beautifully articulated, and that it has not just fallen from the sky, as he said, and there is a real basis of history to how we're here and how easily we can lose those rights if we don't understand them.
How's everyone going for hearing this? Is that okay? Excellent, great.
If the microphone can be brought closer to the person's speaker's mouth, please.
Thank you, Bruce. That's excellent, yep. Yeah, exactly right. And the Magna Carta, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, is up for auction today. I'm reliably informed by council that it's actually just Magna Carta, not the Magna Carta. Thank you, Bridie, that's all right. But nonetheless, it's up for auction, so it might turn out to be one of the originals like Harvard recently found. On symbols and things and flags, we've seen that the Albanese government has been hesitant with the accession of the King and that transitory period from Her late Majesty to actually update our symbols. It's taken a long time it had taken a long time for portraits of the King to be made available. In other cases, symbols are regularly under attack. So if you go to look at the $5 note, that the Queen Elizabeth is being stripped off the $5 note, and the Royal Ensign on Admiralty House's gates has also been removed and will likely never be put back. The military has also had some problems with getting its emblems updated and so on. I wonder, Bev, is there something that we can do more effectively to actually protect our symbols? What is the answer here? Because it seems to me that the Albanese government and others who are Republican in character are not going to stop trying to take them away from us.
Well, all we can do, Alexandra, is keep shouting from the rooftops about how outrageous this is. And every time you find a historical monument being decapitated or covered in red paint, or flags being burnt, we've got to call it out. And Rachel and I have that obligation in the Parliament to do this, and we do it regularly. I think we had a motion recently about making it, a crime to burn the flag. Petitions, a lot of noise, any form of social media activity is always helpful, given that about 50% of the population get all their news from social media these days. Is useful, but that's all we can do is make a noise, isn't it? Rachel, other suggestions?
Yeah, look, absolutely, and Bev, and to call it out, because often it's sort of, you walk into the chamber or you're in the part of the Parliament, it's, oh, hang on a moment, where's the crest, and it's not really until you then sort of quiz, or I talk to the President and like what's going on in terms of sort of in terms of the transition here, to the King and to the crest. It's on my to-do list. It's coming, and I said, well, we want to be correct here in how we are, representing these symbols and how they're being displayed. So, absolutely, yeah, we've got to absolutely keep watch, and this is where members here are so critical to us in terms of the feedback, what's going on, and we can then elevate that and call that out in the Parliament.
I want to linger on the Governor-General for a moment. And the reason for so doing is that as a monarchist, it's very on the nose to be in a position where criticising the Governor-General is something that seems to be now commonplace. But we have a Governor-General who is up to some quite extraordinary things. They're aesthetic and superficial at one level. I mean, the portrait of James Cook that used to be in Admiralty House has now been removed from the entrance hall and placed under the stairs, replaced by some First Nations art, I believe. And so there's those sorts of little things, the emblems on the gates and so on. But then there's actually the behaviour of going on podcasts, speaking regularly to the media, but not even just airing laundry, actually commenting on government policy, which is, to the best of my memory, completely unprecedented. Bridie, I'm going to throw to you. What are your thoughts on this as a barrister? Is this something the Governor-General should be doing, and exactly how do we go about it as monarchists?
Well, I don't think you have to necessarily just be a monarchist. We're governed by a constitution which gives Her Excellency the position which she holds. This doesn't feel like it's on, but it is on.
Yeah.
So the starting point always has to be our constitution and the governing clauses that make it plain that we're all united under the Crown. So sections 1, 2 and 61 of the constitution give that premise centrality. And section 2 provides that the Governor-General is the King's representative, while section 61 actually vests the executive power of the Commonwealth in the King, and it makes it exercisable by Her Excellency. So Her Excellency is our head of state, and this isn't just an ornamental position that she holds. I mean, she's the stabilising centre in situ of our constitutional arrangements, and she derives authority completely from the neutrality that the Constitution places her with. So she has to be above the fray, in my respectful opinion, and rather than be a participant in any contest of any political nature whatsoever. So there's no legal prohibition on the Governor-General accepting patronage roles or speaking to the media or taking any view on anything, but there's a constitutional expectation grounded in this notion of responsible government that's embedded in the conventions of section 61, so that our Parliament is, and through the Prime Minister and then the relevant ministers, are the ones who exercise the power that is given, given to them through the people. And the Crown shouldn't be seen to endorse one position one way or another. And when Her Excellency has become associated with patronage roles where the bodies are advocates for certain causes, such as one that I think Alex may come to, then her position is, I think, diminished, and it does put at risk the very emblematic position that she holds in our constitution and also our system of government. So, while Her Excellency is, I think, very well aware of her position, and I don't think she necessarily intends to defray it in any way. I think she might accidentally be doing it from time to time because of her past. She has been an advocate for a lot of causes in the past, and it's very difficult to denude yourself of that in a short period of time when it's in your DNA. And there's some relevance. That's why we tend to appoint judges, former judges, ex-judges, such as in New South Wales, Her Excellency is the former President of the Court of Appeal, and judges are very accustomed to denuding themselves of their political view. Likewise, as a barrister, I have to remain apolitical. I shouldn't be coming here and giving you any of my views because it undermines the independence of the bar. If I were to turn up and say, I have views on this, I have views on that, because I need to be able to represent all parties, that everyone has equality before the law, and I need to be able to do that. And so these institutions are important for that reason, and that's why we appoint people who have held positions where their apolitical past is relevant to the role. And so I think that that's something that we should bear in mind in the future. But I'm certain that Her Excellency is aware of it, because the role that she took on that I was asked to speak about today was a case in which Katherine and I were involved. It was about gender identity under the Sex Discrimination Act and sex-based rights called Giggle and Tickle. And Her Excellency is the patron, or was relevantly the patron, of an organisation that intervened, Equality Australia, that brought equal marriage laws to Australia, and now is going on and pursuing the transgender identity agenda. And Her Excellency was relevantly the patron of Equality Australia at the time of the intervention, and they took a very political role in the case, but she no longer is. It's now Ian Thorpe. So I think no, I don't think she's a patron, because I saw him on Instagram saying that he was a patron.
Two patrons.
I don't know. I may have it wrong, but I thought it was Ian Thorpe now. Anyway, I thought that was to Her Excellency's credit, because the minute that it was made public that this was a position that probably should not be taken by our Vice-Regal representative, Ian Thorpe stepped in. So there we go.
And that's very interesting as well, because if it is the case that the patronage arrangement between Government House and Equality Australia has changed, it would actually demonstrate just how important grassroots activism can be, since so many of us in this room have been quite vocal about the inappropriateness of that patronage, and as well, I know you wouldn't mind me saying this, John Anderson as well. Just throwing over to Bev and Rachel, amongst constituents, do you think there is an attitude for, not an attitude, an appeal or an appetite among constituents to be more or less lectured in virtue by the Crown's representative?
Well, for a start, I don't think any self-respecting Republican should take on the job of Governor or Governor General. I mean, I don't know why they're energised in the role with all that it attracts and offers, and I find it an insult to their own personal opinion on being a Republican. Why would you possibly take on the role in the first place? So, that degrades, in my mind, their capacity to do their job properly. But amongst constituents, look, I don't think many constituents that have contacted me are fussed about the governor, really. I mean, it could end up being, Auntie Sally's place, really, because we're going down that path of everything in Victoria, everything is wrong. But I think they're more interested in how it affects, how activities of government, and whether the Governor or the Governor-General have a say in that, affect their lives. So the day-to-day problems that exist for every family, every parent, every small business person, that's what energises the population that I deal with. I mean, the most inquiries I get about potholes, and then it goes on to transmission lines, and then it will go on to gender lectures in schools. But what the Governor or Governor-General think or do hasn't really got them excited at the moment. But if they protrude and penetrate too much into the public space, maybe they'll all get very excited about it.
So before Rachel goes on, you can keep the microphone down that end. I suppose jumping in there on that for Rachel, if it is the case that constituents aren't particularly interested, maybe in a day-to-day capacity in what the vice-regal position is up to, and maybe what the views of the Governor-General are, why is there such a insistence to be lectured on the views that the Governor-General has by the Governor-General, and so on? And maybe Kath, you can add to that after that too.
Well, Rachel, you have a go.
A couple of things. I'd say, look, constituents, and if I just draw back to the level of concern and uncertainty and division that the voice referendum experienced there. And I spent a lot of time on this across New South Wales, and I think coming off the back of that, it was in terms of the Governor, the Governor-General, the system of government. I think there's a reaffirmation of the importance of stability, equality, democracy, and that's and then the second bit would be kind of the overreach of government. Government can't tell me what to do. So I just don't think that the political lectures they contrive, but the public aren't even engaged on that one. That would be my thinking. And I think the level of support really for the monarchy now, and and the King and the royal family, you've seen a real lift in that, and the respect and the independence, and it's sort of like the good old days. They're trusted. This is how we work. It keeps us safe. It's security. I think there's just definitely that undertone, and that's being reaffirmed.
Well, I think this can all be brought back to a lack of understanding of civics and how our system actually works. I mean, many people probably don't even understand quite what the Governor-General does, and I know we've seen in the media recently, all the lefties getting all hysterical about Gough Whitlam being booted out 50 years ago, and in reading commentary and so forth, it seems to me people don't understand that at that time the system worked as intended. The supply bill they couldn't get through, so they had a double dissolution, then they had a general election, then obviously he got unceremoniously booted out in a landslide. And instead of getting all upset about, Gough being given the boot, I think we should all be really proud of that moment in our history, whether we're on the right or the left, because at the time it was a constitutional crisis, and in other countries and other societies around the world, there would be bodies and blood in the street, military coups, systems of government overthrown, and these people just sort of not understanding that we should actually be proud of what happened. And it's because they don't actually understand how our constitution works and how we have this check and balances of the double dissolution if Parliament can't advance bills that will effectively pay the government's bills so they can keep the lights on. So I think, in people sitting there making criticisms, and I really don't think the Governor-General, further to Bridie's point, should be getting involved and making comments, and someone really needs to be advising her not to stray into the culture wars, because they are so divisive and they are sort of the time, and when we reflect on it, it's not going to look good for her that she was involved with Equality, who then stood up, and I mean, she's involved in some women's groups and the Minerva group, which promotes women's sports. And then there she is aligning herself with Equality, that spent 5 years fighting for single-sex marriage, and then gets up in court and tries to argue that sex is just a spectrum. I mean, it really sort of debased her position, because it's nonsense. And we're going to look back on this whole gender woo in 50, 100 years and think, what happened at the beginning of the 21st century? But I think, it comes back to that fundamental point. Our children and our teenagers really need to be educated properly on how our system works and take pride in it, because we have avoided having a civil war on the continent of Australia, because we have a constitution that has functioned very well for 125 years. And I think we should all be proud of that.
In a past life, the Governor-General actually founded the Minerva Network, so that's a very interesting little tidbit. I'll let you decide if that's a conflict of interest.
There's nothing political about that. It's just about gender equity in sport. Like that's unifying.
Yeah. I'm informed by counsel. And we're going to talk about the dismissal, of course, because it is the 50th anniversary of that later in the conference. Some great questions coming through too. We're going to move to those in a sec. But before we do, I just want to change tact very slightly. There's now a treaty that's come into effect in Victoria. I'd like to get Bev's view on, what's going on the ground, and then Bridie, maybe if you could give us a technical overview of what's happening with that.
Okay.
Well, in Victoria, we're full of firsts. We've just passed the most egregious piece of legislation, in my view, in the history of the Victorian Parliament, where we've effectively created a fourth level of government that is totally unaccountable. It is funded by everybody but accountable to no one. And it's called Gulong Wal, and it's the name, the translation is the tip of the spear or the pointed spear. And it's the name of the First Peoples body that houses the First Peoples Assembly. Now, this organisation has total control over everything we do in the Parliament. There has to be a statement of compatibility with every piece of legislation relevant to Gulong Wal. The Gulong Wal, has the right to have meetings with ministers, minimum of 2, even the right to have a meeting with the Chief Commissioner of Police. Now, nobody can get that. We don't have a right to have a meeting with the Minister or the Chief Commissioner of Police, but Gulong Wal does. They can set up businesses, but they're not subject to payroll tax or land tax. They're funded to the tune of, it starts off at about 25 million, gets up to 70, and then it's just endless. And their role is to provide, and I quote, leadership, advice to government, support truth-telling, and hold the government accountable. So the Parliament of Victoria is now accountable to this fourth level of government. But Gulong Wal is actually the language from the Kurnai Gunai group, and Auntie Pauline Mullet is most aggrieved by the whole thing, because they were never consulted about the use of their language. I referred to that in my speech opposing the treaty. And so as it happens, she's now the author of a petition, and I'm the sponsor of a petition that is calling for the treaty to be repealed, etc. So on the issue of consultation, even with their own people, the First Peoples Assembly can't consult, and neither can the government. So they've been held to account for that. It really is a monument to division in Victoria, and it undermines the equality before the law and the unity of all Victorians. And supposedly we're going to close the gap, but funnily enough, all the government departments that are involved in so-called closing the gap, they are still in existence. They're the ones administering closing the gap activities. So I'm not sure how the gap will be closed, because the same people are involved in trying to close the gap and they haven't managed to close it so far. So that's an issue. But, you know, my position, I opposed the whole process of the treaty when it came into the previous Parliament, and of course I opposed this furiously, and I'm very pleased that the coalition have a position of we opposed it. It was so bad we didn't even try to amend it, because I think you should never try and amend bad government legislation, and we're pledged to repeal it within the first 100 days of attaining government. So we have to and we basically need, you know, one government that governs for all. We don't need two sets of laws for individual groups. And, you know, I go around my electorate in parts of it with extraordinary disadvantage. And I remember Jacinta saying once, even before you became a politician, Jacinta, that if there's disadvantage, you should treat it not by the colour of your skin, but by need. And I don't see why the, you know, fourth generation disadvantaged in the electorate of Corio should be less important than the Indigenous population. And we had a situation of it playing out in Victoria recently, when St Vincent's Hospital are being given an award because they're going to prioritise Indigenous patients over everybody else, and they have to attend to Indigenous patients within the first 30 minutes of their presentation at the St Vincent's Hospital. So everybody else has to wait, and they're being awarded for what effectively is discrimination. And that's what we have with the treaty in Victoria. One group is being advantaged against the rest of us, who are effectively being discriminated against. And the power they have and the endless funding they'll require. And, you know, in Victoria we voted no to the Voice, and in the most populous booth in my electorate, where the Indigenous population are to a certain extent, they had an 86% no vote. So I'm not sure even most of the Indigenous population think this is a good idea, and only about 7% of the Indigenous population in Victoria voted for who could be on the First Peoples Assembly anyway. So it's not widely representative by any strength of the imagination. And I see it playing out in Victoria all the time, because we now have cultural heritage management plans, which are agreements that were negotiated by government with mobs, and I'm not being disrespectful, that is what they're actually called, as they've joined together. And a local government has to give priority to Indigenous business, first priority, Indigenous employment. They have to be consulted on the names of any roads, on road works, on water easements, on basically everything that happens at local government level, which just adds to the cost for the ratepayers in this whole so-called consultation process. And what is going to play out is we'll see down the track. But it also is the whole idea of it is to propose more treaties. So about 30 are planned with groups across Victoria. So it is a terrible piece of legislation, and I hope no other state gets energised to do the same thing, although New South Wales is, aren't they?
Yeah, thanks, Bev. And what we have in New South Wales, we've got appointed taxpayer commissioners that are consulting with New South Wales on a treaty, and then the government sort of will take the next step from that. It's interesting because the government went to the last election talking the treaty, and then we had the referendum result. They've gone quiet. And it's sort of by stealth here. We've got the the appointed commissioners consulting, and it's interesting just in terms of and Bev, when you actually look at the result on the voice referendum and where the strongest no vote came from, they came from the big migrant communities. They came from the Aboriginal influenced communities. And we heard it ourselves, I'd be talking to, local schools in the centre, like Lithgow Public School. The dads had come off there, we'd talk about the referendum and that, and then they'd go, my family's got the same needs as the Aboriginal families. And we just want that recognised today. And that's just the equality piece there. I've spoken in the Parliament many times on the referendum, the result, what it means to New South Wales. The result has to be respected by the Parliament. And then they push back and go, well, there was voter confusion. They didn't know what they were voting for on the voice. And then they sort of keep walking away and will not be confronted, but be absolutely holding them to account on this. And if there was any attempt here to do this, I'd be their strongest. I'd be the biggest critic, and I'd be absolutely putting this to the Liberal Party room on this. Yeah.
Well, again, apolitically, thank goodness it's at state level, is all I can say, because it's irrelevant. It's just a cultural, political statement really enshrined in a piece of state legislation. Interestingly, this is a conversation I've had with JP a couple of times when we were talking about the voice before she ascended to being the voice of the voice. But before 1901, there were large parts of Australia that actually were unoccupied by white settlement. Most of northwestern Western Australia and pretty much most of the Northern Territory. Yet we nevertheless unified under the Crown in 1901 to create the Australian Constitution. And as we all know, terra nullius, which is the international doctrine by which Australia's sovereignty was founded, is a fiction. And so sovereignty technically in parts of Australia was never ceded. But it has been by virtue of the fact that we have unified pursuant to the Constitution. So again, we come back to this governing instrument. Thankfully, the state treaty is always going to be subject to sections 101 and 109 of the Constitution, which is about state constitutions being subject to the federal constitution and also state laws not being able to be, being invalid or read down to the extent to which they're inconsistent with federal laws. So federal sovereignty is completely unaffected. And the only way that federal sovereignty could be affected was through constitutional referendum, which is why the voice, voter confusion. I'm glad they were confused because it would be worse if they were not confused and had voted in the alternative, because I think that would have introduced the relevant confusion. It is just an act of Parliament. It has no effect on sovereignty whatsoever. It is just going to be more, consultation, and it is a political and cultural edifice, really, as opposed to anything that affects what you should all be at your heart concerned with, and that is the Constitution as the constitutional monarchists.
It probably is, at least in my estimation, worth saying that really we are actually extremely privileged to have, as I say, my estimation, but I'm sure many of yours as well, a national hero in the room. So if you please would put your hands together for Jacinta Nampijinpa Price. That's terrific. Fascinating about the language group hadn't been consulted. It reminds me of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And there was no methodology to the Uluru dialogues at all. They were conducted sporadically. The questions were different amongst tribal groups and so on. So the scientific method was totally out the window. We have some great audience questions, which I'm going to throw to now. A lot of these are actually going to carry over, I think. We'll do them in State of the Constitution because there are quite a number of constitutional questions. which are really good. But one for Kath. Kath, if you could dispel the biggest myth about the monarchy, first of all, what is that myth and how would you do it?
Put me in the hot seat. So the myth about the monarchy, well, I think that people fixate on the person who is occupying the crown rather than what it actually symbolises. And I think people understanding that, yeah, okay, so you might not like Charles, you might be wanting Wills and Kate or whatever, you might have an issue with the person who's actually occupying it at the time. But I think we need to be grateful that this is a birth line that's come through over 1,000 years. And these people are born to this role and they are trained for it. And I know people, politics of envy, they go, oh, well, they have all these houses and all this money. But, what is instilled in them in terms of, responsibility and dignity and sacrificing their lives to serve their people. And obviously, that's very much embodied in our dear Queen Elizabeth. And I think just having respect for the fact that these people are at service of the people. They're not... It really frustrates me when you see people, yes, being envious and saying that we should get rid of the crown or be a republic, because the other thing that many people don't understand is what a great deal we get here in Australia. We have a head of state, the Crown, as I keep saying, 1,000 years behind them, and it really doesn't cost us a thing. We pay for their security when they come out here for a visit every 3 years, as opposed to when we look at the circus over in America and how much the president costs and the presidential election and all the drama and the upset and having an election every 4 years. Instead, we just have this continuous line. It's very stable. We know what's going to happen. And I think there's just a real misunderstanding of how valuable that truly is, despite the actual individual occupying the crown.
Yeah.
Last question for this panel. We'll throw it over to one of our parliamentarians. They can decide amongst themselves who will be the victim. A question from Bruce. A question from Bruce Marriage. What is it like standing in front of 3 flags instead of 1 when you have to?
Well, I've got to tell you, in my office there are only 2 flags, the Victorian and the national flag, and while we can give out other flags, I don't have them in the bottom drawer, so you have to go down the road to the Labor member. So I don't find myself standing in front of 3 flags, Alexander. If I did, I'd
blow up.
well, I'd workshop it out of the picture anyway. That'd be for sure. Or I'd move to the other side. But I've no intention of standing in front of 3, 4, 5 flags.
Yeah, look, thank you. And like Bev, I have the Australian flag, New South Wales flag in my office. It's funny how many requests I have for people to borrow the flags because they're not available anywhere. And even yesterday, when I was sort of going down to this this sort of lunch event on the other sort of near Parliament House, I actually took the national flag with me and the flagpole, and because people were wanting photos to and it's the importance, it's the identity, and so it's and then when people come to different events and they see the flag, the national flag, the New South Wales flag, I'm commended on it. So in our patch, we uphold this. This is important to us. Yes, likewise, Aboriginal flags, not available.
Not found in the bottom drawer.
No. Yes, yeah, so, yeah. Yeah.
I just have one thing I want to say.
You may.
As a mother, this is not as a barrister, but okay, everyone, this is just as me personally. It's a personal view. Why don't we sing the national anthem in schools anymore? Because it's only sung at sporting events. This is an idea. You cannot stop people burning the flag. That would be against the implied freedom of political communication, is my view. But we should encourage everyone to sing the national anthem because it's, you know, we all unify in sport. We all love our sporting heroes. It doesn't matter, you know, what sport. It could be, you know, pistols, it could be swimming, it could be, you know, lawn bowls. We don't care. We'll celebrate it. Anything where we perform well on the international stage, and that's when we sing the national anthem without any opprobrium whatsoever. Why are we not unifying ourselves by teaching our children our national anthem and singing it at every school assembly? We all sing it. Why are our kids not singing it? And I think that, if we just introduce that, that would be the best civics education that we could start with. It's just a song. It's quite a nice one. And I think that it would probably be more unifying than not. But they don't sing it at my kids' school. They sing every other bloody song. And, you know, we had to be upstanding the other day at Speech Day for the school song. I was like, oh, great, we're singing the national anthem. We weren't. We were singing the school song. So, anyway, that's what I think. Just make the kids sing it again, and then, you know, we'll see this conference in 30 years' time renewed.
Well, one thing's for certain, it's definitely better than that awful thing the Kiwis have got. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please thank our first panel for today, Bev McArthur, Rachel Merton, Katherine and Bridie Nolan.